Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world obsessed with light, positivity, progress, achievement, smiles for the camera, success for the resume, but there is another part of us, a part we exile, deny, and pretend doesn't exist. It's the part of you that rages in traffic, that resents your friend's success, that whispers, "You're not good enough," the part you hide from your partner, your family, even yourself. This is your shadow, and ignoring it is quietly destroying your life. Today, we uncover why, through 5 revelations. You believe, perhaps with conviction, that by silencing anger, by suppressing shame, by ignoring fear, you vanquished them. But what is buried does not decay, it waits. It waits in the corridors of the unconscious, just out of reach, shaping our reality with invisible hands. You may tell yourself you've moved on, that the past is the past, that pain can be bypassed with logic, achievement, or positive thinking. But repression is not resolution. The psyche is not a graveyard. It is a garden, and what you plant there, even in secrecy, will grow. Whether it blossoms into beauty or bursts forth in ruin depends not on whether it is seen, but whether it is faced. There is a realm within us all that we fear to enter, a terrain woven from instinct, memory, and the primal energies of emotion. This realm is often called the shadow, not because it is evil, but because it is hidden. It holds everything you were told not to be, the rage that was punished, the desire that was shamed, the tears that were mocked, the truth that was denied. The world told you to put these away, to be good, to be successful, to be calm and agreeable. And so you learned to wear the mask, but the self you exiled did not disappear, it learned to wait, and so it waits, in the clenched jaw, in the insomnia, in the sudden panic that seizes the chest with no clear cause, in the way we sabotage love when it gets too close or erupt when we feel too small. The shadow waits in those moments where your reaction feels foreign, larger than the moment allows, as if another self is steering. And in truth it is. The self you denied steps forward because it was never erased, only ignored. Take the story of Thomas, a model of composure, a paragon of professionalism, calm, courteous, controlled. The world rewarded him for these traits, but the world did not see what simmered beneath: rage long silenced, shame masked by success. A childhood full of ridicule that taught him to swallow his voice, to make himself small to avoid conflict. He became the perfect image of what others wanted him to be, but within he was not at peace. He was at war. That war ended in a moment of rupture. A simple challenge in a boardroom. Someone questioned his authority, and the calm exterior cracked. Thomas exploded, shouting, seething, breaking the illusion he had spent decades perfecting. A chair flew across the room. Silence fell. Then consequences followed. Fired. Shunned, ashamed, what happened, people asked. Who was that man? But the real question was, who had he been all along, not a stranger, but a neglected self, a version of him that was never allowed to speak. You see, emotions are not problems to be solved. They are messengers. They arrive with news from the depths of the psyche, signals that something within demands acknowledgement. Anger tells us a boundary has been crossed. Fear warns us of danger, real or perceived. Shame reflects a fracture in belonging, a sense of exile from connection. But instead of listening, we exile the emotion itself. We shame our shame, fear our fear, rage against our anger, and in doing so, we deepen the divide within. The longer we pretend we are whole without reckoning with the parts we hide, the more we become actors in our own lives. We play the role others find acceptable, wearing a mask of normalcy, of strength, of composure. But underneath, the exiled self grows restless, and like all banished things, it hungers for return. When it does, it rarely knocks politely. It storms the gates. This is why breakdowns come suddenly, why relationships collapse without warning, Why addiction, depression, or anxiety appear like invaders. They are not invaders, they are revelations. They show us what we refuse to see, and yet this is not a curse. It is an invitation. The shadow is not a monster, though it may frighten us. It is a guide, a teacher. It is the part of you that holds not just the pain, but also the power you abandoned to survive. In your anger lies passion. In your fear, the will to protect. In your shame, a longing to be seen. These are not enemies of growth. They are the very soil of transformation. If we are willing to tend to them, to heal is not to become perfect. It is to become whole, and wholeness requires confrontation. Not with the outside world, but with the inner one. You must enter the dark forest of the self, not to slay the beast, but to understand it. To listen to the trembling child who still lives in your heart, to grieve the years you spent pretending, to welcome home what you once rejected. We were not meant to live split in two. We were not born only to achieve or to impress, but to feel, to struggle, to awaken. There is a depth within you that cannot be accessed through ambition alone. It requires descent into the places where your voice was lost, into the memories that still ache, into the emotions that haunt your quietest moments. This descent is sacred, and in that sacred place, healing is not a destination. It is a return. There is no shame in seeking help. In fact, it is one of the most courageous acts a human can undertake to say, "I no longer wish to live divided." Thomas did not enter therapy because he was broken. He entered because he was blind to himself, and the moment he chose to see, he began the work of integration. That is the work we are all called to do. You are not here to deny your story. You are here to own it. Not because it defines you, but because it shaped you, and only by embracing it can you shape yourself anew. The shadow does not vanish through force. It transforms through compassion. When you greet your pain with understanding, you reclaim your power. When you honor your anger without letting it destroy, you rediscover your voice. When you look at your fear and say, "I see you," it begins to soften. So ask yourself, what parts of me have I buried? What have I silenced to survive? And am I willing, finally, to listen? Because the truth is this: what we do not transform, we transmit. To our children, to our partners, to our communities. The wound, when ignored, becomes legacy, but the wound, when faced, becomes wisdom. That is the gift of the shadow, not just for you, but for those who come after. The path forward is not light alone. It is shadow and light, held together. Only then can we become real. Only then can we become free. There is a force within us, subtle and often cloaked, that shapes our choices, tempers our relationships, and steers the arc of our lives. It is the part we disown, the aspects we deny, the emotions we repress. This force is not external, though it often manifests as though it were. It is the shadow, the unseen driver behind many of our conscious decisions, the keeper of our forgotten pain, and the mirror we dare not look into. When left unacknowledged, the shadow becomes tyrant rather than teacher. To live without knowing this inner darkness is to live under its rule. It manipulates us through fear, through old wounds, through memories so painful they've been buried in silence. But silence does not mean death. Repression is not eradication. What we bury, we empower. What we refuse to face, we grant dominion over our lives, and so the shadow, neglected, becomes sovereign. We like to believe that we are free agents of our will, that our choices are ours and ours alone. But if we were to trace the roots of our motivations, would we find self-awareness, or would we uncover scars dressed as certainty? Picture a child, tender in their emotional expression, punished or mocked for their vulnerability. That moment, a single scarring instance, can set into motion an entire character architecture. What was once a natural emotional flow becomes a forbidden terrain. That child grows, but the wound does not. It festers in the dark, crystallizing into armor, hardening into cold independence, mistrust, and a refusal to ever be exposed again. We meet this adult later, and perhaps we see them as guarded, distant, even harsh. But we do not see the child curled inside, whispering from behind the barricade, "Don't let them in, it's not safe." The adult is not heartless, they are haunted, they are not cruel, they are terrified. Their shadow, the residue of fear, shame, and survival, commands them from the depths, and so many of us are living this way, smiling on the outside while steered by internal saboteurs. Choosing partners, careers, beliefs, not out of genuine alignment, but as a defense against pain we don't even realize we're trying to escape. We chase validation, not joy. We seek power, not peace. We build identities not on truth, but on the rubble of suppressed experience. The shadow is not evil. It is the accumulation of everything we were too afraid to confront. It holds our pain, but it also holds our potential. For in that same place where the wound resides, so too does our capacity to heal, to love, to understand. This is why denial is so dangerous. It's not just that we don't see the shadow. It's that by refusing to look, we give it freedom to act without supervision. Like a child left alone in a room full of matches, it plays with power it doesn't fully understand, igniting conflict in our relationships, sabotaging our success, warping our perception of self and others. We think the world is against us, but it is often our own unexamined trauma casting long shadows on the people and places around us. We fight with partners not because they are our enemy, but because they touch a part of us we thought we buried. We avoid intimacy not because we don't want it, but because the shadow has convinced us that closeness leads to pain. We pursue perfection not out of passion, but out of a belief that only flawlessness can keep us safe from judgment. And none of this is random. Every fear, every reaction, every self-imposed limitation has an origin, a moment, a wound, a shadow. To ignore the shadow is to remain trapped in cycles we cannot name. To pretend we are unaffected by the past is to doom ourselves to repeat it. But to face it, to turn toward the uncomfortable, the painful, the repressed, is to reclaim authorship of our lives. It is to say, "I will not be ruled by ghosts." It is to excavate our truest self from beneath the rubble of conditioning and fear. There is something profoundly liberating about looking into the darkness and refusing to flinch. Not because it is easy, not because we are unafraid, but because we know that the only way to stop being controlled by our shadow is to become intimate with it. To see it, to name it, to integrate it. This is not a process of erasing the past, but of reclaiming it, of gathering the fragmented parts of ourselves and saying, "You are part of me. I will not exile you any longer." This work is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to sit in discomfort without fleeing. But what awaits on the other side is nothing short of transformation. Not a perfect life, but an authentic one. Not a mind free of fear, but a heart brave enough to love anyway. Not a path without pain, but a soul unafraid to walk it. When we face the shadow, we do not become darker. We become whole. We become the full expression of who we were meant to be, not edited by fear or scripted by shame. And in that wholeness we find something deeper than happiness. We find freedom, the freedom to choose from a place of clarity, not compulsion, the freedom to respond with wisdom, not reaction, the freedom to create a life that reflects not our trauma, but our truth. This is the great invitation, to turn inward, to meet the stranger in the mirror, and to offer not rejection, but recognition. You are not broken, you are not lost, you are simply waiting to be seen. And once you are truly seen by yourself, then, and only then, can you begin to live a life of your own making, one not dictated by fear, but directed by purpose, one not ruled by the past, but radiant with possibility. The shadow will always be part of you, but it does not have to control you. It does not have to be your prison. It can be your guide, your teacher, your most loyal ally, if only you are willing to turn and face it. For in the darkness we fear there is not just pain but power, not just wounds but wisdom. And in the act of facing what we once fled, we do not just change our lives, we reclaim them. Ever wonder why the very people we love become the ones who wound us the most? Why the warmth of intimacy so often turns cold, filled with arguments, avoidance, and icy silence? The truth lies buried not in the faults of others, but in the hidden terrain within ourselves. When we enter relationships, be it romantic, platonic, or professional, we do not do so as empty vessels. We bring with us our past, our fears, our unspoken wounds, and most of all, our shadow. The shadow is that part of us we refuse to see. It contains the emotions, impulses, and memories we've disowned to survive, to be accepted, to be loved. But make no mistake, it does not disappear. What we refuse to face within, we inevitably cast upon others. Our relationships become stages where these unseen forces are projected. Instead of relating soul to soul, we engage in battles with ourselves, mirrored in the faces of those closest to us. Consider the word projection. It is not just psychological jargon. It is a profound truth of human interaction. We project what we reject. The partner we accuse of being needy may only be reflecting our own unacknowledged longing for connection. The friend we call selfish might simply dare to set boundaries we've never felt allowed to create for ourselves. The coworker we see as arrogant could be carrying a boldness we buried long ago to remain safe. In this way, every relationship is an invitation, a mirror held up to the self, but few accept this invitation. Instead, we react, we accuse, we fight, we walk away thinking we've escaped the pain, only to recreate the same script with someone new. The faces change, but the pattern remains. The cycle persists because the root has never been addressed. Let me tell you about Lisa and Jay. On the surface, they were opposites. She felt too much, and he felt too little, or so they believed. Lisa wept when Jay shut down. Jay withdrew further each time. Lisa demanded emotional depth. Their love became a battlefield. Each believed the other was the problem. Lisa blamed Jay's coldness. Jay blamed Lisa's intensity. But neither was seeing clearly. Both were trapped in projections. In truth, Lisa was terrified of her own vulnerability. Jay was terrified of his. She needed affection but was ashamed of it. He needed connection but had been taught it was weakness. They weren't fighting each other. They were fighting themselves, projected onto the other's face. It wasn't until they confronted their shared fear of intimacy that peace began, not a peace built on compromise or surface-level agreement, but on truth. A peace born from self-recognition. This is the work that awaits all of us if we are to truly evolve in our relationships. The moment we see our partner, friend, or colleague not as the enemy, but as the reflection of a wound, we reclaim our power. Not the power to change them, but the power to change ourselves. And in that change, relationships are transformed. But make no mistake, this work is not for the faint of heart. To see your shadow is to walk into the darkness of your own psyche. It is to feel shame, guilt, grief, emotions long exiled. But these emotions, uncomfortable as they are not our enemies. They are doorways. They are the cries of an inner child who was told that their feelings were too much, their needs were unworthy, their truth too dangerous. When we dare to listen to that child, we begin to heal, and healing is not a tidy process. It is raw, it is painful, but it is also beautiful, because as we reclaim those parts of ourselves, we no longer need to find them in others. We no longer chase approval or fear abandonment. We relate from wholeness, not from lack, and in this wholeness, love becomes possible. Not the fantasy love of stories and screens, but a real, grounded, sacred connection between two beings who see each other, not as saviors or threats, but as companions in the journey toward truth. A love that honors difference, holds space for wounds, and refuses to engage in the war of projection. We all long for this kind of connection, and we all carry within us the tools to create it. But we must begin by looking within. We must ask not, why is this person hurting me, but what part of me is speaking through this pain. We must stop trying to fix others and start becoming the person who no longer needs to project. The irony is that the more we own our shadow, the more compassion we find, not only for ourselves but for others. We see that their anger is not evil, but a mask for pain. Their distance is not rejection, but a defense against being hurt. And suddenly, we are no longer enemies. We are humans, raw, flawed, and beautiful, doing our best to survive. This is not weakness. This is the deepest strength. To choose understanding over blame, reflection over reaction, love over fear, this is the sacred alchemy of the soul. This is how war zones become places of healing. This is how toxic cycles are broken. And so, the next time you find yourself in conflict, before pointing the finger outward, pause. Ask yourself, what am I being shown about myself? In that moment, you may not only save your relationship, you may save a part of yourself that's been waiting for you all along, the part that's been hidden, waiting to be seen, to be loved, to be freed. There is within each of us a realm we are taught to avoid, an inner continent cloaked in mystery and silence, the shadow. This hidden world, often misunderstood, does not merely consist of what is deemed negative or shameful. No, it contains far more. It is the crucible of all we have disowned, our forgotten passions, our wild creativity, our primal power, and the deep voice within that speaks not in words, but in symbols, sensations, and dreams. It is the terrain of instinct and emotion, the place where the untamed parts of our soul wait, not to destroy us, but to be welcomed home. Yet we fear it. From a young age, we are taught to present only what is acceptable, digestible, and praised. We are taught to suppress our rage, our sensuality, our vulnerability. We become polite, composed, rational, at the expense of becoming whole. The rational mind becomes the sovereign ruler of our lives, while the intuitive mind, the one that knows without knowing how it knows, is chained in the cellar, and with that we begin to feel disconnected from life, from joy, from the electric current that once pulsed through us with possibility. This disconnection is not accidental, it is the price of exile. When you cast out the parts of you that do not fit into society's neat boxes, you are not just banishing discomfort, you are casting out brilliance. The fire dims not because you are incapable of greatness, but because you are running from the very fuel that would ignite you. When you bury your shadow, you bury your fire. We often cling to the illusion that the shadow is dangerous, chaotic, even evil. But chaos is not the enemy. It is the raw material of creation. Within the darkness lies the soil where transformation takes root. A tree cannot grow toward the heavens unless its roots reach down into the rich, unseen earth. The same is true of the soul. Take the story of Mia. She spent years locked in a sterile office, wearing tailored suits and forced smiles, convinced this was what success looked like. Yet inside her there was a hollow ache. She had become a ghost in her own life. It wasn't until she attended a retreat, surrounded by strangers and silence, that the dam finally broke. She faced the grief she had hidden for decades, the grief of a childhood lost too soon, a voice silenced too early. In allowing herself to feel that pain, to hold it like a long, lost friend rather than a feared enemy, something shifted. A flicker of warmth returned, a memory stirred, her love for color, for brush strokes, for bringing beauty to life on a blank canvas. Today, Mia's paintings hang in galleries not because she chased success, but because she embraced the broken, beautiful parts of herself that she had once tried to forget. This is the paradox. Your greatest gifts are not found in perfection or control. They are hidden behind the very dragons you have been taught to slay. But these dragons are not here to harm you. They are not monsters. They are guardians. They protect the door to your treasure. They roar only because they want to be seen, to be heard, to be integrated. When we refuse to face our shadow, we create an inner war. We split ourselves in two, the self we show the world and the self we keep locked away. Over time, this split drains us. We feel anxious, depressed, tired. Not because we are weak, but because we are divided. Wholeness does not come from denying your darkness. It comes from walking into it with open eyes and a courageous heart. There is something sacred in choosing to turn inward, to sit with your anger and ask what it is trying to protect, to cradle your shame and discover the longing beneath it, to meet your envy not with judgment but with curiosity. These emotions are not flaws. They are messages. They are arrows pointing to wounds, to desires unmet, to life unlived. And in this process, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself you didn't even know you had lost. That instinct you silenced. It becomes your guide. That wild energy you tamed, it fuels your purpose. That voice you ignored, it starts to sing. Suddenly, you are no longer a prisoner of your past, but an artist of your future. You begin to shape your life, not from fear, but from fullness. This journey is not easy. It asks you to be honest, to let go of the masks, to feel what you have numbed, but it is also the only path to real freedom. Because what we repress doesn't disappear, it festers. It seeps into our relationships, our health, our work. And yet, when we embrace it, when we sit in the fire rather than run from it, we are transformed. You were not born to be a shadow of yourself. You were born to shine, not despite your darkness, but because you have dared to enter it. The world does not need more polished masks. It needs people who have walked through their own night and emerged with truth in their eyes. So when you feel lost, when you feel flat or disconnected, do not seek a quick fix. Do not reach for distractions. Go deeper. Ask yourself what you have been avoiding, what part of you is crying out for your attention. What dream did you abandon for the sake of approval? What fire still burns, low and lonely, waiting for your breath to reignite it? Do not silence that call. It is your soul trying to come home. The intuitive mind, that sacred gift within you, is not a luxury. It is your compass. And the shadow is not an enemy. It is the terrain it leads you through. Trust it, follow it. Let it show you not just who you are, but who you have always been beneath the layers of survival. You have nothing to fear in the dark. The only real danger lies in pretending the darkness does not exist. For it is only by facing what you have buried that you will finally remember how brightly you were meant to burn. There is a kind of suffering born not of external injury, but of internal disconnection. A silent ache that gnaws at the edges of our being. It is the suffering of a divided self. We present ourselves to the world in curated fragments, the confident face, the smiling facade, the productive member of society. Yet beneath this performance lives a second self, unacknowledged and abandoned, whose voice is muffled but not silenced. This is the shadow, the repressed, the unloved, the unwanted portions of our psyche. And in our modern age, so obsessed with perfection and positivity, we exile this shadow into deeper and deeper corners of our unconscious. But what we exile does not disappear, it festers, it returns in disguise, it breaks through the mask we wear, not with clarity, but with chaos. Denial is the root of this torment, not the denial of facts, but the denial of parts of ourselves. We deny our fear and it manifests as cruelty. We deny our sorrow and it calcifies into rage. We deny our longing and it twists into envy. And so the soul begins to fracture. not from weakness but from abandonment. We become haunted not by the world, but by our own reflection. This haunting takes many forms: depression that weighs like a stone upon the chest, anxiety that flutters like a bird trapped in the ribcage, addictions that whisper the promise of escape. These are not random afflictions. They are the language of a soul begging to be heard. There is a tragic irony in all this. The more we run from the shadow, the more power it gains. What we refuse to see grows larger in the dark. What we refuse to feel gains strength in silence. Eventually the pressure becomes too great, we shatter. The person we thought we were, the controlled, successful, righteous persona, crumbles under the weight of the disowned self. And in that crumbling, many feel despair, but there is another path. Integration is not a soft, sentimental act. It is not a poetic notion reserved for spiritual mystics or intellectuals. It is the fiercest kind of courage. It is the decision to descend, to willingly walk into the dark forest of your own psyche, knowing that monsters live there, but that some of them wear your face. The process is not tidy. It is not clean. It is not always safe. To sit with your shame is to tremble. To acknowledge your envy is to see where you feel inadequate. To honor your rage is to admit that you have been wounded, deeply, unjustly, and that beneath your fury lies an even more vulnerable truth, pain. But from this raw honesty emerges a startling grace. The parts of you that were cast out do not wish to destroy you. They simply want to come home. They want to be seen, understood, embraced. Not because they are right or good, but because they are yours. Every emotion, every impulse, every memory that you have rejected holds within it a piece of your vitality. Wholeness, then, is not the elimination of darkness. It is the reabsorption of all that we are. It is the act of standing before a mirror and not flinching, not because we see perfection, but because we see the truth. And the truth, though painful, has a strange and healing power. When the inner war ends, a great silence arrives. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of peace. The silence of a self no longer fighting itself. Integrity is not moral superiority. It is internal alignment. It is the capacity to move through life without splintering at every turn, because the parts once at odds are now in conversation. The mask is no longer needed because there is nothing left to hide. I once met a man who had spent his life fleeing the darkness within him. He ran into religion, into success, into distractions of every kind. But the more he ran, the louder the screams became, until one day, exhausted and alone, he stopped. He sat in the quiet and turned inward. What he found was not a demon, not a monster, not a flaw beyond repair, but a boy. A boy who had been locked away for decades. A boy who had been wounded, left behind, forgotten. And when this man knelt down and held that boy, not with shame, but with compassion, something extraordinary happened. The screaming stopped. The boy, finally seen, no longer needed to cry for attention, and in that embrace the man was made whole. This is not an isolated story. It is a pattern etched into the architecture of the soul. We all carry a child within us, fragile, feeling, fiercely alive. When that child is ignored, it acts out. When it is embraced, it guides us home. The journey to integration is not for the faint of heart. It demands humility, it demands honesty, it demands that we surrender the illusion of control and step into the uncertain terrain of the unknown self. But for those who make the journey, the reward is profound. To live as a whole person is not to live without fear or pain. It is to live without the constant dread of being discovered. It is to move through the world without hiding, without pretending. It is to love without manipulation, to speak without distortion, to create without inhibition. It is to be truly oneself. There is no greater freedom than this, and no deeper healing. For when you become whole, you become real, and when you are real, you can truly connect with others, with the world, with the divine spark that animates all things. So do not fear your shadow, do not run from it, invite it in, sit with it, listen, it has something to teach you, something only it can reveal, and in that revelation lies the path to your wholeness. You are not just your strengths. You are not only your light, you are also your sorrow, your sins, your secrets, and when you accept all of who you are, your past, your pain, your potential, you become unstoppable. The shadow you fear holds the keys to your freedom. So don't run from it. Turn, face it, speak to it, listen, and welcome yourself home. Thank you.